Dear students and friends, welcome to Design Thinking Web Series 5. In the last session, we discussed about design, designer, designer's mindset, relationship between design thinking and innovation. In this session, we are going to discuss about the popular champions of design thinking from industry and institutional perspective. Also, at a very high level, we are going to review the basic frameworks of these champions, and we'll also discuss one case study so that you can appreciate one of these frameworks. Though there are multiple frameworks available in the market, I'm going to list out only few of them which are popular, which are widely used. From industry perspective, IDEO, Frog, and Continuum are the famous design companies, and they are working with the design thinking very closely. From an institution perspective, Stanford, University of Virginia, SMU, Singapore Management University, Rotman School of Management are providing the best of the frameworks, and they are popularly used. I have also shared the URLs of these frameworks. You can review them at your leisure. Now the simple question we have is, which is the most popularly used or which is the best framework among these? Though the question is very simple, but the answer is absolutely difficult. The answer is as difficult as whether mother loves son more or a daughter more. It is a very tough choice. To answer this question, I would like to share a childhood story so that you can make your own assessment of which is best and which is popularly used and why it is used. Once there was a crane and fox. They were good friends. One day, Fox invited Crane for a dinner. She prepared excellent soup and served the soup to the crane on a flat plate. Crane could not able to take the soup because it has a long beak and the plate is actually flat. She could not able to finish the soup and left home. After a few days, Crane invited the fox for a dinner. She also prepared excellent soup. However, this time, Crane served the soup in a long, narrow neck jug. Fox tried her level best to lick that soup, but because of the long, narrow neck, she could not able to take the dinner. My dear friends, hope you understand the essence now. The ultimate purpose in both cases is to take the food. However, each of them requires a different set of operators so that they can actually take or they can relish their dinner. Similarly, whenever a designer is selecting a particular framework, he should look at the need, he should look at the context, he should look at the comfort, and based on that, he should be able to select a particular framework and implement that particular framework. Otherwise, there is no good framework and there is no bad framework. All frameworks are working for a same cause to reach the ultimate goal and to make a human-centered approach and solve a particular problem of a customer. Hope you got that essence now. Now let us look at a few of the frameworks from institution side and from industry side. For an operational simplicity, I have taken two from industry side and two from institution side so that you can have a overview of some of these frameworks and how they are working for a same cause. Now let us look at Stanford's design thinking framework. Stanford design thinking framework has 5 phases. Stanford design thinking framework is a nonlinear, iterative, which tries to understand the users, challenge the assumptions, redefine the problems, and create solutions to prototype and test. This is how the framework works. Now let us look at each of these 5 phases which are presented in the slide. The first phase is empathy. How does this empathy works? It all works with the empathetic understanding to a particular problem which you are trying to resolve, typically through a user research. So you need to underline there is a user research, there is an empathetic way of dealing that particular problem. These are the two aspects which you need to focus on. So what do you mean by empathetic way of dealing, right? Why this step is so important among all the phases? Because in this particular phase, you need to set aside your basic assumptions, your own prejudice, your own understanding, and look at from the user's perspective. Look, get into a user's shoe and gain the real insight from a user's perspective. And also, you need to understand the user problem and their need and their way of handling this. This is what is the empathy phase is all about. After completion of empathy phase, you get a lot of information which you try to dissect, you try to analyze that information, you also try to synthesize that information, and you define the core problem. After that, you nail down that problem into very specific problem statements which you are going to deal with. After completion of the define phase, you move to an ideate phase. In this particular phase, you challenge the assumptions. You think out of box. You think without box. After that, you would actually take few ideas or you generate multiple ideas for the specific problems which you have chosen in the define phase. After completion of the ideate phase, you move to the prototype phase. In this particular phase, you would actually kind of develop the best solutions possible. Your designer team would actually sit together and try to develop inexpensive scaled down version of some of the possible solutions and to try to test them and redefine them, revisit them, and make sure that you come out with a probable prototype in this particular phase. Finally, you would move to the test phase. In this particular phase, designer team would actually test the prototype against the need, against the market need, and try to redefine and bring the best solution possible and which can be actually delivered to the market. If you look at the Singapore management framework as well, more or less it goes in a similar fashion. There is some kind of commonality between both of them. It has a define phase, it has an understand phase, it has a redefine phase, and it has an imagination phase. This whole concept is called empathy. Then the whole concept moves to the action phase. It has a make phase, it has a test phase, it has a tell phase. In the define, in the understand, in the redefine, which we talked about in the empathy, more or less it comes to that same model. In the imagination, which we discussed about the ideate part of it. In the make, it is more of a prototype. The test is more of a real test, and tell the story to the market. More or less, I think it goes in a similar fashion. Frog Design Company has introduced a Frog's Collective Action Kit. I'll just share the gist of this whole framework and how it is going to deal with. This collection kit is created to help the community leaders bring together various groups to solve a shared problems and act on them. This is what exactly is the purpose is about. So this kit is given to the community leaders and there should be a shared goal or shared objective and everyone is going to work towards this particular cause. It consists of an action map and 6 activity areas. If you look at the middle of this action map, there is a shared goal. Everyone has to work towards this particular shared goal and they have to make this shared goal as a real goal. This is what is the whole objective is about. Each of these team members would actually work on one of these 6 activities and everyone is going to work towards that particular shared goal. Redefine, redefine, redefine. Finally, they have to make that goal. In the process, they might actually alter the goal itself, but still that is acceptable to the whole framework. Finally, I would like to brief about the idea design thinking framework, which is considered to be the most popular and pioneering in the design thinking itself. It has 4 quadrants. The first one is inspiration, the second one is insight, the third one is ideation, and the fourth one is implementation. If you dissect that framework and make it as a flat framework, it looks like this. The first one is frame a question. The second one is gather inspiration. The third one is generate ideas. And the fourth one is make the ideas tangible. And the fifth one is test to learn. And the sixth one is share the story. Look at each of these objectives. Let us look at the objective of the frame a question. Identify a driving question that inspires others to search for a creative solutions is what his objective is about. You need to identify a specific question which would actually inspire others so that they can bring some creative solutions for that particular area. There is a subtle way of handling this. Whole empathy is embedded in this. When you complete that exercise, then you would start inspiring more and more and gather more and more data points, data insights. How do you inspire? You would inspire by looking at the people needs. You would inspire by interacting with the people who are actually in the need. That is the phase which we are talking about. After completion of this exercise, then we move to the generate ideas. It's more of an ideation phase. In the next phase, you would make an inexpensive scaled down version of the prototypes and see if they can actually become a solution to the problems which we discussed. The next phase is to collect the feedback and to try to redefine the product or service which we are looking at. Finally, after completion of this process, you would create a human story which would inspire others so that it actually becomes action. Now I would like to share a case study which has been jointly done by Bank of America and IDEO, and they employed this particular design thinking framework and tried to solve one particular issue, and they brought a huge impact. Let us look at the case study and the contest. Initially, when they started this whole process, they kept the goal as to encourage new customers to open bank accounts. They want to increase the number. The situation was, the problem was not very clear and it was not a user-centric problem as well. However, bank has a broad desire to bring a human-centered approach to the industry and try to address some undefined need. Bank's ultimate interest is to increase the customer segment of boomer age women with children. How did they start this whole process? How did they make this empathy phase successful? They started talking to the multiple customers. They started making a lot of interviews. They observed various families in this particular area. They started making a lot of conversations. They started making a lot of interviews, and they made a huge number of observations and collected those observations. When they started looking at each of these observations, they found interesting patterns in this. The first one is, in many families, mothers were in charge of managing finance. And they are also often on a tight budget, and they have to keep track of their spending very meticulously. And they also observed that many of these women kept the checkbook registries in which they listed their bills, expenses, and ATM withdrawals, and so on. Design researchers started looking at each of these checkbooks, and they realized that some of them actually rounding up the numbers. Instead of 22.73, they are making as a 22 for a simple calculation. But it also added a little buffer each month, and sometimes they are actually getting unexpected savings. And the second observation which they made is inability of the mothers to save. The researchers found an unaddressed need in the banking itself, and it has actually created an opportunity for them to create a huge value to the customer and to the bank as well. Now look at the phase-wise each of the activities. In the second phase of insight, they received two important insights. The first one is, women rounded up her checkbook numbers for easier calculation and a buffer. Look at the statement. The second realization is, mothers struggle with saving money because they have nothing to put aside or because of impulse buying. These are the two important insights which they received during the insight phase. At a later stage during the brainstorming session, team of product managers, team of finance experts, team of software engineers, and operational experts started brainstorming, and they made almost like a 20 brainstorming sessions, and they received 80 plus product concepts, and finally they have chosen one idea. Later they moved to the prototype and test phase. They created a cartoon and they displayed this cartoon to almost 1600 testers. In the process, there are multiple iterations went in. The first one I think we already discussed is more of a rounding off issue. But in the process, they also observed, or they also kind of realized, they also kind of culled out another two aspects. A rounding off is actually bringing some kind of overdraft issues. So they also try to address that particular issue. And the third element is, as a promotion, as a marketing effort, bank has actually announced 100% matching grant for the savings for the first 3 months. So these are the three ideas, these are the three additional features which have come encountered during the iteration phase. Finally, the Keep the Change service has turned to a huge success, huge impact. This Keep the Change program has attracted more than 2 million customers in a less than a year. More than 12 million customers signed up for a program and saved more than $2 billion in total. This is the kind of huge impact which it has created. 60% of all new customers enrolled into the Keep the Change program, and 99% of the customers who signed for this program stayed with it. This is the kind of impact which they created in this particular scenario. My dear students, hope you tasted the different flavors of various frameworks and how they can be used in a real life scenario. I'm sure with this understanding, you would be ready for taking up another case study and try to map these case study elements to some of these phases and see how the value has been generated. Thank you so much for patience listening. In the next session, we would go a little deeper into each of these phases, what are the tools available in each of these phases, and how these tools can be implemented or put into action. Stay tuned. I'll be back with my web session shortly. Thank you so much.